So Marvel Comics announced yesterday that Nick Spencer's time as writer on Amazing Spider-Man is going to be coming to an end this September. And even though the title is just getting started with the Chameleon Conspiracy and we have a ways to go at the time of this recording, I thought this would be a good time to take stock of Nick Spencer's run on the title and kind of see how it measures up. So, first off, he got Peter and Mary Jane back together, which is something that a lot of Spider-Man fans, including myself, are happy to see because she is too good at being a balance to Peter Parker to leave on the sidelines or out of the title. Also, Nick Spencer has done a good job in bringing some classic villains that we haven't seen in a long time back, like the Sin Eater and the Tri-Sentinel, and he's done it in ways that make sense. They don't just feel like comic tropes, bringing these old villains back, and doing so kind of shows his knowledge of the character and his knowledge of the lore that came before him. He's also given us a really good Kraven story, which ended up putting Kraven back in the grave where he belongs. All this while introducing Kindred, an overarching villain that's been there since the beginning in his run and by the looks of things is going to last all the way to the end. He's made good use of Spider-Man's existing rogues gallery, giving us some pretty good stories and pretty good battles with some classic villains, as well as bringing some of the new villains from recent runs into the fold and integrating them pretty well into his overall rogues gallery. But I can't just heap a bunch of praise on him without getting into the criticisms, because while this run has had some really good highs, it's also had some lows. First off, the Spider-Man Peter Parker dynamic. As good as Nick Spencer has been at writing Spider-Man, I feel that his Peter Parker has left a bit to be desired. The personal life of Peter Parker aspect really seems to be sidelined in this title. And the stuff that's happening in his life, while it's interesting and he's a part of it, it kind of seems like he's being led around by other characters. Even the relationship with MJ, as happy as I am to have it back, there's no impact here. Everything is too easy for them. I feel like their relationship is a bit on cruise control. There's no conflict. She's never in any danger. She's not fretting over Spider-Man, or Peter Parker going out of Spider-Man and getting hurt anymore. And while I don't know that this is all Nick Spencer's fault, a lot of this feels like it might be a bit of instruction from Disney and Marvel to kind of keep Mary Jane reflected a certain way. She just doesn't seem to need Peter around. She almost seemed more affectionate towards him during Dan Slott's run when they weren't together. And she's never in any danger or given a point where Peter Parker has to choose between being Spider-Man or helping Mary Jane, which has always been kind of their dynamic. I think there's even a storyline during this run that, while wasn't part of Nick Spencer's Spider-Man, it still bled into it, where she ends up taking on Mysterio and thwarting a supervillain herself, which is cool, but there needs to be something there. We need some drama. We need something to keep this relationship kind of firing, keep us interested. Next up is Jonah Jameson. Now, Jonah has been a constant foil for Spider-Man since the beginning. As the publisher of the Daily Bugle, he has published article after article calling Spider-Man a menace and turning every good deed he does into some kind of criminal act or something that he needs to be condemned for. And I understand that Nick Spencer kind of inherited this disjointed, kind of pointless version of Jonah that was left over from the last run, where he's not the publisher of the Bugle anymore. I believe he was mayor by the end of that last run. Now they've kind of put him back in media, but they've given him a podcast, which, that's more modern than having him publish a newspaper, but Jonah Jameson does not spark me as modern. In fact, if I were to come up with the top 3 words to describe Jonah, modern would not be that wouldn't be in the top 50. So the fact that he's there with his podcast, and the podcast is there to help Spider-Man. And I understand that characters, especially characters that have been around for a long time, they grow and evolve and they change, and point of views change, and enemies can become allies. But Jonah never seemed to have that bone in him. He seems pretty dug into his opinions. So the fact that they've converted him into the Spider-Man fan is really awkward for me to watch. Not to mention, Jonah is an old school reporter, and if there's one thing that today's news climate has taught us, is journalists and reporters don't change their minds on things very often. I mean, I don't see somebody like Sean Hannity deciding that all of a sudden the Democrats do a pretty good job in becoming a cheerleader for Joe Biden and Barack Obama. And I don't see that same change in J. Jonah Jameson. I don't know. This was always something that bugged me. I can see Jonah changing his opinion as where he dislikes Spider-Man for different reasons, but I can never see him coming fully onto Spider-Man's side. And to Spencer's credit, he has put them in kind of a frenemies type position where even J. Jonah Jameson's support somehow hurts Spider-Man. And unfortunately, as a result of this storyline, we got one of the most ridiculous Spider-Man costumes in the history of time, where he was trying to become an internet star or something. So I haven't quite enjoyed that dynamic as much. And again, not quite his fault. I think he inherited this Jonah, and he's kind of done the best he can with him. But I really would like to see Jameson back to his old ways. Next up, we've got Boomerang. Now, Nick Spencer got his start in Spider-Man writing The Deadly Foes of Spider-Man, which featured Boomerang and a bunch of Spider-Man villains. And he's carried them over to this title, which is fine. These are characters he's familiar with, he's comfortable with. He kind of defined them quite a bit. He's given Peter Parker Boomerang as one of his roommates, along with Robertson's kid, the other editor of the Daily Planet. And I don't know. I don't like Boomerang. He's an annoying character. He's been annoying throughout this entire story. And yeah, he's brought a couple of good comedic moments. There was a storyline where he actually brought Peter Parker to a bar that was Spider-Man Trivia Night. It was a supervillain bar. And he was supposed to be a ringer. He doesn't know that Peter Parker's Spider-Man at the time of this bar scene, but he brings Peter Parker because he knows Peter knows a lot of it about him since he took pictures of him all those years, and wants him to be his ringer so he can finally beat the reigning champion, who was Shocker. So Peter Parker goes up against Shocker and loses. He loses a Spider-Man trivia contest, and he goes nuts over it because he knows he's been cheated. But he can't say how he knows he's been cheated without revealing he's Spider-Man. That was a good comedic moment. That was fun. But overall, I think Boomerang has been too much in this book. He's not a great character. He doesn't move the story. They've kind of given him a shrunken alien monster as kind of a weird animal sidekick. And it's, to me, Boomerang has just gone completely off the rails. And he seems to have kind of parted out of the book for now, but something tells me he's probably going to be back before this series ends. I don't need that to happen, but that's what I think is going to happen. Finally, we have to look at Kindred himself, because Kindred is Nick Spencer's biggest contribution to Spider-Man. Not only is he a new villain to the Rogues Gallery, but he is the villain. This has been the overarching presence throughout his entire run. He's been lurking in the shadows, manipulating events, and Peter Parker has run up against him a couple of times, and those tend to be very big stories when he and Kindred actually come to blows. Kindred, for those of you who aren't following the Spider-Man comic, has been revealed to be Harry Osborn, Norman Osborn's son. He is back from hell, essentially, and he's kind of become a demon. Or he's become some kind of supernatural creature. He's got these, as you can see in the cover, these millipedes that kind of follow him everywhere and do his bidding, and he's got smaller ones that can go into people's ears, and he can control them that way. And he seems to have enthralled a lot of Spider-Man's villains and has really orchestrated a lot of the events that have happened in this run of Spider-Man. And Spider-Man doesn't always know when Kindred's involved. He gets these nightmares of Kindred killing his loved ones. He got kind of a part of Kindred's plan in a storyline where we thought maybe Kindred was going to be finished, but it seems like even after Spider-Man kind of overcame him, he's got a lot more to do in the storyline, as now he's captured. He's in Ravenloft, which is being run by Norman Osborn for some reason, and he is being studied by him, and Norman is treating it like, oh, I'm going to treat him, he's a patient, but in reality, he just wants to reach out and get his son back, whereas Kingpin has been financing and keeping Norman Osborn in power with the idea that if Kindred's come back from the dead, that Kingpin can use him to bring his wife Vanessa back from the dead. So they're kind of using each other, trying to somehow each contain Kindred. Norman Osborn obviously just cares about Harry. Kingpin cares about his power to bring back the dead, and that's caused a big power dynamic between the three of them that has yet to come to a head. So we're going to see where that goes. So it's really too early to call on Kindred. I can say that I like his design quite a bit. He's been dang evil I'll give him that much. He's turned his allies against him. He's unleashed an army of mutated monsters. He's been a nasty villain, but we got to see how he ends to really put the final note on him. And that's kind of where we're going to leave this, because we've got a bit of time, 3 months left, and Spider-Man's bi-weekly. So we got quite a few issues, plus Nick Spencer's given us a lot of tie-in books as he does major storylines. He'll do issue 68 and then 69, and in the middle there'll be 68.1, which will be kind of what else is happening off camera during the main run. So you get a lot of, he gives us a lot of story in his stories, which has been pretty good. So while the final chapter is not written, I can say that Nick Spencer's run has been above average. One of the better ones. Not my favorite, definitely not the worst. It really harkens back to old Spider-Man stories, like from the early 100s and 200s, where you would have Spider-Man would have these kind of episodic adventures while a major story arc was playing out in the background that would eventually come to a head. And those are the kind of Spider-Man stories I like. That was kind of how they did it with the Hobgoblin era. That's how they really did it, in the beginning with Venom, where he would linger in the background for a couple of issues and then he would appear. The Hobgoblin was this mystery that ran through, I think 50 issues of Amazing Spider-Man before the Hobgoblin saga finally came to an end. Green Goblin was about the same way. Norman Osborn learning who Spider-Man is and just messing with his life and messing with his loved ones till that finally came to a head with the death of Gwen Stacy. So the best Spider-Man stories are written in the story structure that Spencer is using, which I like. He's righted a lot of wrongs that have been done to Peter in the past, which I've also liked. Getting Mary Jane and him back together, putting Kraven back in the grave. He's even dropped hints that maybe before his run ends, he's going to find a way to undo the One More Day storyline, the infamous story that all Amazing Spider-Man fans love to hate. So we will see in these final months what Spencer can deliver. We got the Sinister War to look forward to, the end of the Chameleon Conspiracy, and we know that his last storyline is going to be called At What Cost Victory, which sounds like it's going to be epic. I hope it's going to be good. I have enjoyed this run up to this point, so I'm enjoying the Chameleon Conspiracy. Chameleon is such a fun villain. What a great guy to bring back. So what do you guys think? What have you thought of Nick Spencer as a Spider-Man writer? Have you stuck with the title? Do you read the book normally? Has he, if you're a longtime Spider-Man fan, how does he stack up to your favorite runs? My favorite writer for Amazing Spider-Man was the guy who was writing it when I started collecting it, which was David Michelin, and that was a pretty legendary run, in my opinion. Can you think of anybody better? Did you drop Spider-Man after One More Day, and did this run maybe bring you back? Or maybe if you stuck with it and this run's turned you away? Let me know all the deets in the comments below. While you're down there, hit like, subscribe, help the channel grow. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you on the next video. Thanks for sticking with me through this one, and I will see you on the next one. Goodbye.